Hi, this is Bailey Rivera with the Calligraknitter podcast. You can find me on Instagram as Antiquaria Bailey. Today it's a special episode, if you will, the start of a series on how to knit socks. I am obsessed with wearing and making hand knit socks. They are by far the best thing that I've made, and it's kind of surprising that something so simple and so utilitarian is my favorite thing that I've ever knit, and I wear them almost every day, but it really is a game changer. The fact that they're made of 100% wool or very near 100% wool means that they're durable and I can wear them much longer than my cotton socks. My cotton socks will be expired within a day, and I can wear the wool socks, with light use basically all week. And they keep my feet warm in the winter, and when it's warmer outside, they keep your feet a bit cooler because they wick away any sweat that's on them, however gross that might be. Anyway, I thought I would, before we jumped into how to knit socks step by step, I thought I would talk a little bit about what you need, getting your materials together, and how to go about diving in headfirst into sock making if you never have, or if it's been a while, or if you just want to try a new technique. I have never followed a sock pattern verbatim. I have only used them as guides for like a pattern on the sock, or which I actually think I've only done one. I mostly just knit plain vanilla socks that I can use I've knit them for my mom and for my husband as well. So they're mostly just a very utilitarian object. Anyway, so to dive in, I'll show you, this is my favorite pair of socks that I've made. It's a Patton's Croy sock yarn. And they were self-striping. So beyond the heel, which is a different Patton's Croy, beyond that, all the stripes were created from the yarn. So this was just straight knitting, which is wonderful. The way that a sock is knit, or the way that I knit my socks, there are many, many ways to knit socks. But I start at the toe, I knit up the foot, then I add the heel, and then which is only knit on one needle from the round. That doesn't really make sense, but anyway, you knit the heel, then I knit up the leg, and then I knit the cuff, and then I cast off. And you can also knit from the cuff all the way down. You can knit and put the heel in the very end. I mean, there are so many ways to do socks. This is just the way that I do it. As much as I would like to try a bunch of different techniques, I like having the rhythm of always having socks going and knowing kind of how I do them so that they're easy and like cast them on, let's go, get up, get to the heel, go up the leg. And most of the time I do knit my socks 2 at a time. For this tutorial, I will be doing 1 at a time because it is a little bit easier that way. And that way you can look up varying heels if you want to. And you can also do any sort of patterning that you might want to on the foot or on the leg. I'll talk about that later. So when I knit socks, I look for sock yarn or fingering weight yarn. You can certainly knit socks out of any weight yarn you want to, but the finer your yarn, the finer and more wearable your socks will be with shoes. So if you wanted to start and knit a pair out of a little bit thicker yarn, you certainly could. I would say they'd be more like a house slipper. Basically, yeah, like a house slipper, like a thick wool sock to wear around your house. It might be hard to put them in anything beyond maybe galoshes. So anyway, I have a few different options here. This beautiful Anzula yarn is what I will be knitting the socks for this tutorial out of. It's Anzula hand-dyed yarn, squishy. It says 7.5 stitches to an inch on a US 2 needle, and it's an 80% merino, superwash merino, 10% cashmere, and 10% nylon. The colorway is Sea Breeze, and the yardage is about 385 yards. So anyway, those specs are something that you kind of want to look for. Of course, it doesn't have to be cashmere. This will be sort of a luxurious, not necessarily tough wearing everyday sock, more like a pretty, I'm wearing fancy shoes, or I'm, dressed up maybe, but not I throw them on with my clogs and go gardening, which I do have wool socks that I use that for. Anyway, so that's what I'm going to be using for this tutorial. My favorite sock yarn that I've knit the most socks out of, and these socks that I showed you earlier, are Patton's Croy. And this is a 75% washable wool and 25% nylon type of yarn. I find them to be incredibly durable. This is the Celestial Colors colorway. It's really pretty purples and teals, and the yardage on these is so that like for a woman or for a man's sock that doesn't have an enormous foot, you can get one sock out of one ball. So I always buy two, and if it's something that I really love, I might buy three, and then I could do a really tall sock or a sock for my husband who has a larger foot. So anyway, the best thing to do with these is to go to your local craft store. I usually go to Joann's. I use a coupon, or sometimes they're on sale. So normally I get about 2 for 1, or at least one that's 40% off. And that makes them like a pair for $7 or $8. So it's definitely the most affordable wool, durable option for utilitarian socks, which I love. I have numerous pairs of these, like 2 balls of Croy yarn, and anytime I find a color I like, I will buy it, because I can always cast them on and I know that I will wear them and they will serve me for a long time, so it'll be worth my knitting time. Another really popular sock yarn is Regia, which is German. And this is part of the design line by Arnie and Carlos. It's really popular. If you look up hashtags of it on Instagram, you will see many socks knit up in Regia. So these are both self-patterning, so they look a little bit crazy, but they will knit up, not necessarily in exact stripes, but in segments of pattern, segments of color. This one will be more like a Fair Isle. So if you can see on that, it's not the exact colors of it, but that's the general pattern that will be created as you knit, and just simple knit stitches. So it's kind of fun. It definitely makes the sock knitting go very quickly because you want to go to the next repeat, to the next color. Oh, if I just get here, then I'll stop. And so it's very addictive. And so it's very good for just cranking out socks. Anyway, this is a little bit more expensive, but it's not horrible. Anyways, so this beautiful hand-dyed yarn is usually considerably more pricey than some of the more utilitarian yarns that you can buy either at your local craft store or at your local yarn shop. They should carry them. The hand dyeds would be more like at your local yarn shop, or you can find tons of wonderful, beautiful sock yarns online on Etsy to purchase, but they will be a little bit more of an investment. Granted, they're beautiful and will be so fun to knit. So anyway, I'm excited to knit with this one. It's mostly solid, but has beautiful depth of color. See that? Some darker teals. It very much, sea breeze is a really, really lovely descriptor for it. Anyway, so to get started, we will you will select your yarn, and I've selected a fingering weight. And because I've knit socks before, I generally know how many stitches I want to cast on and how many stitches I want to get to for my foot. So that is what you're going to need to figure out first. And I have some notes about how to do this. So for a fingering weight, you're looking at about 8.5 to 10 stitches per inch on a US 0, which is 2 millimeter, or US 1, which is 2.25 millimeter needles. So I use a 0, so the 2 millimeter needle. I use an Addi Turbo. I use a long circular. Usually I use a 60 inch. This looks to be shorter than that, but it'll be fine. So you want a probably at least 32 inch circular, anywhere from a 32 to 60 inch circular. You can also knit socks on double points. Many people find this to be much more intuitive. I've never knit socks on double points, so I will only be showing you how to do it on a circular, but I'm sure that you could find other tutorials on how to do that if that is your preference. So you will need to get a needle, and because I'm generally, I wouldn't say I'm a tight knitter or a loose knitter, I'm pretty even, I don't know. I mean, there's no right or wrong. It's just a matter of how you tension your yarn. So I find that I have a pretty good tension, and I guess would err on the looser side. I don't know. I knit my socks usually on a 0, sometimes a 1, never anything larger, because otherwise they'll be too loose. The stitches, you want a nice tight fabric for the socks so that they're durable and warm, and you would also want negative ease so that they really fit on your foot and don't slide down. So you pick your yarn, you pick your needles, and then you're going to want to make a gauge swatch. So you don't have to do this every time, but you want to have a general idea of how many stitches per inch you personally knit with your yarn and your needle of choice. So for me, I know that I knit on a 0 most of the time, and I know that I knit with fingering weight yarn most of the time. And while the fingering weights will vary, I can tell that this beautiful Inzula is going to be a little bit on the thinner side, whereas the Croy is a little bit thicker. I'd still knit both of them on a 0, My gauge might be a little bit different, but in general will work out, and I just know that from knitting numerous pairs of socks, that once I get a general gauge and know how many stitches I'm going to need, that I can just run with that. So you will want to take the measurement of the largest part of your foot, so probably up, if you nestled it like right behind your heel and wrap a tape measure, I would suggest doing that. Just getting a general idea. You'll get your gauge, you'll figure out how many stitches per inch you're knitting with your yarn and your needle, and then you want to multiply that by the size of your foot. Now, you don't want that exact measurement because you want negative ease. So you're gonna have less stitches than that measurement will be. Anyway, all of that said, I usually knit with 56 stitches on for my socks because I have a size 7 foot and it's generally a pretty narrow foot. If you have questions about that, feel free to hit me up on Instagram or in my email, which I'll leave in the down bar. You can also reference many of the free sock knitting patterns on Ravelry or paid patterns, whatever you want to select and knit, will give you an idea of different sizes and how many stitches you're going to be required to have. So you can just play around with it. I think I usually knit between 56 and 64 for myself, erring on the smaller side. And, you know, it just depends on what the pattern is. If it's a loose, like lace pattern, or if it's Fair Isle, then I know I'm going to need more because the Fair Isle will be tighter. So there's just a lot of trial and error in it. And what I love about it is that I don't really need a pattern because once you get the steps together and you have an idea of, you know, your foot measurements and how you knit, then you can just knit without a pattern, referencing a pattern, or alter the pattern that you find that you love that to fit your foot. So you're not knitting blind and just knitting the pattern and hoping it's going to fit. So I hope that helped you kind of get an idea of how to get started knitting socks. I will be doing a step-by-step sock knitting tutorial on how I knit my socks so that we can all knit them together. There will be different segments and I will go probably fairly slowly so that everybody can be on the same page. And as I mentioned, I'll be doing one sock at a time, but the way that I knit socks, you could certainly do 2 at a time. If you wanted to, and then they're both done. I think I'm going to be knitting them 1 at a time, so 1 on each circular needle, but I think I'm going to do them in tandem, so I'm going to do both socks at a time, but on 2 separate needles, so that I can play around with that. I've never done that before, so I think that'll be really fun. Let's see, what else? I think that's it. Of course, if you have any questions, hit me up, email me, direct message me on Instagram, and I'd be happy to help. And I really look forward to knitting along with all of you socks at whatever point you jump in and whatever experience you have. I think sock knitting is such a fun thing and basic thing to learn to do, that, you know, it's an easy on-the-go project. I actually always have socks cast on, and they're usually what I bring with me when I am running errands and maybe have to wait, or at a doctor's appointment have to wait. When I'm traveling, I like to knit socks. So they're fantastic to just have on the go. And I know most knitters that knit socks always have a pair on the go so that they always have something to knit on. So in any case, I will see you with step 1, casting on and knitting up the toe. And until then, happy picking your sock yarn, so exciting, and just let me know if you have any questions. I'll see you back here soon. Bye.